Dr. Parekh, do you agree with this hypothesis or should we be concerned?
Good evening, Tanvi. Always a pleasure to be with you. I wish I could. I wish I could seek solace in numbers, but I don't blame you for being confused. I love mathematics, by the way. And even for those of us who love math, it can occasionally be mind-boggling. But what I also enjoy doing is converting maths into very simple things. So let's get done with this R naught or R0. The Americans like calling it R naught. So let's just stay with that. The R naught, the reproductive number. First of all, the R naught is entirely dependent on our diagnosing people who are ill. That in turn is entirely dependent on our testing, how many people we test. So if we don't test an adequate number, the input into the R naught is less. And then please keep in mind that there is a reasonably high false negative rate, the sensitivity as we call it, for the RT-PCR, which is the gold standard. So about 35% of false negativity means that when we administer it to 100 people, about 35 people who are actually positive show up negative. These are the inputs that go in and which can contribute to a low R naught, veering towards 1 as opposed to 2. But let me just give you another simple illustration. You know, at an R naught of 2, somebody has calculated, it's a question of taking 34 steps from the Earth to the moon. If each step becomes double of the previous step. It's that old riddle, you know, where the king is asked by one of his subjects to just give him a grain of rice on a chessboard and to double it on the second one and then make it 4 on the third. And all the rice in the kingdom cannot fill up the chessboard. So that's as far as the simplifying maths is concerned. And I hope your confusion is a little clearer. I tend to concur entirely with what Dr. Dasgupta said, particularly his metaphor of the tsunami. The tsunami metaphor is really appropriate, not just because of the surge, because tsunamis tend to come in waves. Now, this is what we've been saying for the past year. We wrote our book on the coronavirus in January, and we, using the example of the influenza pandemic, we talked of 3 waves in which the second wave could be worse than the first wave. More important, Tanvi, mid-December, I wrote out a policy paper predicting fairly accurately the timing and the intensity of the second wave, but more important, suggesting a preventive strategy, and that was very simple. I suggested that vaccination, when it begins, should not only stratify priorities in terms of age, that was undoubtedly important, but along with that, we had very robust seroprevalence data, and that data indicated areas, for example, in Bombay, where seroprevalence or the antibody rates were fairly high, such as Dharavi, and areas, other geographic locations, where the seroprevalence was low. And we suggested then that there was a probability that these areas could be future hotspots. And therefore, when vaccination begins, we should also look at a distribution based on the need in different areas. And so that's another thing. Now, Tanvi, I'm actually tired of listening to myself. I feel I'm aging intellectually because I keep repeating the same things. There doesn't seem to be very much new to say other than tragically, I told you so. Like Dr. Dasgupta, I keep hoping I'm wrong. Unfortunately, nearly 50 predictions we made in our first book have turned out to be right. I cannot gloat on that. It's a tragedy, actually. But we need to learn the lessons of history and move on.
So let's break it down into 2 points that you've raised, that which I did want to talk about. The first about how does this impact, and this wave or tsunami, how does this impact our vaccination policy? And yes, we've repeatedly said that we see the need for it to open up. Instead, what I'm looking at right now, Dr. Ravi, is the government actually even halting fresh registrations of frontline workers, saying that there are irregularities, people who are not eligible are getting it. Shouldn't we instead be looking at stepping it up, and especially in the badly hit areas like Delhi or Maharashtra?
Thank you, Tanvi, for having me on the show. Everybody has been asking me in the last 15 days, why can't we open up vaccination for the entire country? It's more easily said than done. Again, I will use the analogy of simple arithmetic. Out of 130 crore population, take away 30 crore as children who are not eligible for vaccination. 100 crore, out of 100 crore, 2 doses, 200 crore. Where is the vaccine available? Entire global supply is not enough to immunize India. Number one. Number two, it will take a minimum of 6 months to 1 year to cover this population. Where are the people to vaccinate? Where is the time to vaccinate? So I think people are loosely telling, go ahead and open up. If you open up, 2 things will happen. A, the privileged and the advantaged and the economically viable people will get the vaccine. The poor and the disadvantaged will not get the vaccine. It is advisable to go in a phased manner. So I think this is a very well thought out strategy. Having said that, one may have to innovate in terms of doing what is known as ring immunization. And that requires enormous amount of human resource. Wherever in areas some clusters are breaking out, you surround that area for a given radius and immunize all the people around that area. But again, that requires large amount of vaccine supply as well as manpower to vaccinate people.
No, Dr. Ravi.
So
okay, go ahead, please.
On paper, opening up vaccination is a great solution. Practically, it is not.
So, 2 things. Of course, we can't overnight vaccinate a country the size of ours. But if you look at the situation right now, almost every state and every hospital that we've spoken to has said that they have the capacity right now to step it up. In many parts right now, if you enter the vaccination centers, it's a breeze to get in and get out and get yourself vaccinated because they are empty. So what is the harm in stepping it up? You say we don't have enough vaccines. I say we've exported as many as we've used in our country. There are vaccines which are lying waste, going waste because they're getting expired and we're not using them on time. We have pharmaceutical players who are today ready to partner to manufacture more of these vaccines, which can be done. We are still following a plan that perhaps we made 6 months ago and we refuse to step it up from there. Any country from United States to UK or even Israel is managing to break the chain only because of the higher vaccination numbers.
I respectfully disagree. You can't compare India to Israel or United States. The population is log-fold higher. So don't give me that example. I will not accept it, number one. And I will not accept that there are tons of vaccine available. It is not. And number 3, nobody imagined that within 3 months after starting vaccination, by 1st April, it will be open for 45 and above. We thought to cover the 30 crore privileged people of healthcare workers, frontline workers, and elderly will take 6 months to cover. If you work out the time taken to vaccinate a person, how many vaccinators are required, all this exercise has been done, you will require that much amount of time.
But we are still not, we are nowhere close to achieving even that target.
1 minute. The percentage coverage in the people who are eligible is abysmal. By opening up vaccination for everybody, you will again isolate the vulnerable and make them susceptible to disease. So I believe the way to go forward is do this 45 plus for 2 months, look at what is the uptake in the population. Then by June, I'm sure the government of India will open it for everybody. Over.
All right. Let me ask Dr. Parekh if he agrees.
Obviously I don't. And I'm glad that this is becoming a true debate. I hope it's more an urbane debate than just an urban debate. And I believe there is room for a disagreement. First of all, you were absolutely right. Until 2 weeks ago, we had exported actually more than what we had given our population. Second, about 7% of vaccines that were made have expired and been thrown out, whereas we vaccinated less than 5% of our population. And finally, I think this is not debatable. I'm showing you yesterday's figures of the percentages vaccinated in different countries. The United States and UK did make many errors to begin with, but they learned from their mistakes. They reversed policy. UK has now vaccinated more than 50% of its eligible population. The US is around 45%, France, Germany. But look at India. We have vaccinated less than 5% of our population. Now, there is another possibility, and I hope I'm pardoned for bringing the analogy of Israel. I don't want to bring it in quantitative terms, but qualitatively, look what happened. Israel has by now vaccinated nearly 100% of its population, but that's not the point I wish to make. That the second wave in Israel, the crest of that second wave, occurred during vaccination and brought the vaccination program almost to an arrest. And then, of course, it recuperated and took off. My big concern, Tanvi, is we have not seen the crest of the second wave as yet. And if we go slow, coming up with various rationalizations while vaccines are getting expired and going out into the dustbin, then my fear is the crest of this second wave might actually bring the vaccination process to a halt, because the vaccination centers could be, spreader locations. So we need to accelerate. Now, rightly or wrongly, and I'm willing to get corrected by the experts, we started our vaccination program 2 weeks late. I wish we had started it earlier, but that is all gone. There's no point sitting in a debate where we're looking for solutions to try and figure out what went wrong, unless we can use it to set things right. What do we need to do right now? We need to move very quickly. We need to vaccinate everybody over 18. We need to figure out why people are not coming for vaccination. What's the hesitancy? I have a theory on that, but I'll let the other panelists speak, and maybe this time I'll share my theory with you. You know, on the 1st of April, the day when the vaccination was opened up over 45%, at Just Look, the crowds were still sparse. We were prepared for a surge in crowds. Why is that not happening? I'd like to hear what the other panelists have to say, and then I'll share with you my own 2 bits.
Okay, Dr. Rajiv Dasgupta, do come in here. One side says that we obviously don't have the numbers to vaccinate 100 crore people, and then there will be a divide between the haves and the have-nots. The other side says that, well, we do have enough to open it up further. Where do you stand on that debate?
Well, first, there are no simplistic answers. There are various ways of looking at priorities, and some of those have already been flagged. One, of course, is, as our other panelists have said, is ensuring vaccine equity and what it would take to prevent inequity. So, in the US, the ACIP, which is the equivalent of NTAG in India, ACIP debated over multiple strategies, whether it's age, whether it's vulnerability related to health workers, whether it's the vulnerability of the working population, and so on. So that's one way of looking at it. The second is, as Dr. Parikh said, is protecting area-wise. That's also equally relevant. But part of this debate is whether there's adequate vaccine, whether it's going waste, etc. The point is that there are a plethora of vaccination centers in core urban areas, and that's what media is covering. That's where the middle class enthusiasm is, and A, there's a middle class enthusiasm. B, there's a huge digital divide also. The CoWIN app is important, it's good, but it's not the panacea. So therefore, where you see actually relatively empty centers are often half a dozen or even a dozen centers per square kilometer in core urban areas, particularly metropolitan areas. On the other hand, there will be districts where it will be available only at the district town. Just to boost vaccination in the districts, there are outreach centers, but even those outreach centers don't see the kind of enthusiasm that you see in urban areas. So it is an extremely heterogeneous picture, and it's not whether this is working or that is not working. These are all part of very layered realities. However, and I do agree with other panelists, the point is not whether so far it's been correct or not correct. but that given the evolving situation, are we nimble-footed enough to switch strategies, to change gears and so on? And whether it's the time, and let me share it, that states have been asking for it, whether it's a time to move from a one India plan to local strategies.
Yeah.
Leave it to the states, leave it to the districts, let them decide where they want to focus. And state after state has been making that point. The time is really to question the One India plan rather than the prioritization strategy.
Okay, and
the states,
I want to
the
go
states
back.
have a pulse on it, how they would like to prioritize.
Okay, I want to go back to Dr. Sinha, but just before that, Dr. Parekh, people not stepping up in large numbers, and of course it gets reported more in urban areas, but even in outside the big cities, if that is what we're looking at, shouldn't it then be the responsibility of the states and the center to spread awareness? I mean, even in the big cities, we will come across people who have absolutely no idea about the vaccine and how to go about it.
Absolutely, Tanvi. And I believe that there has not been the degree of transparency that should have been there from the beginning. A medical historian, Harold Merkel, wrote almost 50 years ago that in the absence of transparency, we create space for conspiracy theories. The voices of those who are against vaccine become louder and more strident. So we need to make that adequately clear. We need to have almost a propaganda, if I may use that word, to promote vaccination, because without that, people are just not going to come in. But more important, as was alluded just before me, we need to be nimble-footed. We need to mutate, if I may use the word, our thinking. We need to mutate in our actions. The virus is mutating dramatically and rapidly, and we are grounded in a fixed way of thought, which is not flexible enough to keep up with the virus.
And that was going to be my second, conversation point. So let me actually ask Dr. Sinha this, what has been your observation? Why is it in certain parts, Dr. Sinha, we're seeing 50,000 cases being registered every day, whereas in other parts, despite crowded rallies, and absolutely no following of norms, there are barely any cases. Is there a scientific explanation to this, or just lack of tracing and testing?
Well, I think the biggest mystery is why, when the unlock was happening with gradual relaxation, why didn't it, as many people suspected, the numbers again started creeping up? So the thing is that there are many unknowns in, trying to figure out what exactly was causing the steady decline in the active number of COVID cases over, let's say, August until, January. So, even though people were essentially not conforming to any of the guidelines, essentially people stopped wearing masks in, our locality sometime around October, even then the numbers weren't rising up. So this essentially has to do with the fact that, you need a critical nucleus of cases before, it can start spreading again. It's not like, the pathogen would essentially be able to automatically spread from individual to individual as soon as people stop wearing masks. You need this critical nucleus. And the conditions were just right sometime in, essentially mid-February that, we happened to, the pathogen happened to hit that sweet spot, so it started rising. And let me point out that, it's not quite true that, it's so heterogeneous across India. So if you actually look at when the second wave actually started in different parts of the country, we see that they essentially happened within weeks of each other. So Punjab essentially showed R value of greater than 1 on February 9th. Maharashtra followed on February 12th. Madhya Pradesh followed on February 14th. Telangana on February 17th. Karnataka on February 18th. Haryana on February 19th. Gujarat on February 20th. So you can see, essentially within a day or two of each other, all of these states essentially are switching over to an epidemic mode. And, following that, Delhi on February 23, Assam on the same date, Rajasthan and Andhra Pradesh on the next date of February 24, Uttarakhand on February 26, Tamil Nadu on March 8, UP also on March 8, West Bengal on March 15. So you can see that, it's not quite true that, the epidemic has occurred only in certain isolated pockets. we see a remarkable synchronization of the epidemic, which we actually didn't see during the first phase, essentially because of the lockdown. So we essentially had stopped all the long distance transport. And so therefore, all the outbreaks were essentially happening in localized mode. But now that we have relatively more communication between different regions, it's possible that this is what has caused this synchronized appearance of the second wave.
Okay, interesting that you say that. In fact, let me actually go across to Dr. Ravi on the variants conversation, Dr. Ravi, that's also happening everywhere. Do we now have any specific studies that you would want to cite to tell us if anything is different with this virus, and which is why it's spreading faster in Maharashtra versus anywhere else in our country? Dr. Ravi, you may be on mute. I can't hear you. No, can't hear you, sir. Maybe you've muted yourself. Yes, go ahead, please, now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now I can.
Okay. Variants will continue to emerge. That is the law of nature. This virus has an enzyme that makes mistakes when it copies its genetic material. Number two, vaccinations and immune pressure will also result in emergence of variants. So we have to live with variants. Having said that, let me tell you that in India, we started genomic sequencing about 2-3 months back. It is just picking up. Our results show that there is at least one variant which has been noticed in Maharashtra, which is a double mutant. Whether it is responsible for increased spread, we need very hard epidemiological data, and I believe that is not available now. Or we need to grow this virus in culture and show that it multiplies much more compared to the parent Wuhan strain. Both of these have not happened. Irrespective of whether it's a variant of concern or it's a variant, the task in front of us is not to do research on variants. We know whether it's variant or not a variant. Masking, social distancing, and avoiding crowded closed spaces and maintaining hand hygiene is the only way. Even vaccination is going to take 6 months. It may be useful for preventing a third wave, which if we continue like this will definitely occur. But right now the task on hand is not to debate on variants, but to bring about behavior change in people through appropriate communication. I've always maintained India miserably failed to communicate to its masses on what is important. Over.
So why, Dr. Ravi, are we seeing such higher cases in Maharashtra than anywhere else? I mean, initially, everybody kept saying, well, because people are not following norms. But I don't see people following norms in any part of this country.
It's very simple. Maharashtra was the epicenter when the epidemic started last year. This year also it started there. As my previous panelist very beautifully said, it is not that only some states it is exploding. Wait, it will explode everywhere. That is the law of nature. The way people behave, that is going to definitely happen. It's only a question of a couple of weeks later. And I also must tell you, as my previous panelist very beautifully said, you need certain critical super spreader events for the explosion to occur. And then sparks will fly everywhere and it will ignite. It's like a Diwali sparkler. The sparkler was lit in Maharashtra. It has spread to many places. Same thing is happening in 8 other states. So I don't think there is room for debate on variants, whether they spread more. Of course they spread more. So what are we going to do about it? We have to follow COVID appropriate behavior. That is the topmost priority at this point of time. Over.
Fair enough. Well, if that is the case, I think we can't even afford to be complacent in any part of the country. Unfortunately, that's what we are looking at.
Absolutely, I go with that.
Yes. So, Rajiv Das Gupta, how do we make people follow these rules? Everything else that, we've tried from center to the state governments making appeals, and, in Maharashtra, the chief minister himself issued warnings for 1.5 months before he brought in these lockdown-like restrictions.
Let me address two aspects. I'll quickly answer the behavior part, and I fully agree with Dr. Ravi. And for 1 year, again, as Dr. Parikh said, we are tired of hearing ourselves. In India has just not invested in social and behavioral research vis-a-vis these practices, and that's particularly ironic given that this is the mainstay of prevention. Given that there are no definitive treatment, not yet, given that vaccination, as we know, is going to take a very long time. So there hasn't been adequate investment, even not now. Risk communication, community engagement, these are the weakest links as far as India goes. But why variants of concern are important? The lesson is to look at Punjab. Roughly between December and January, the UK variant has spread to at least 60 countries globally, gradually establishing itself as the dominant strain. Punjab has established reasonably early enough that the UK variant is a factor in Punjab. You will see that within 2 to 3 weeks, the mortality in Punjab has gone up to 5%, which is actually breaching the benchmark of 4%. So there's a big lesson from Punjab. The problem in Maharashtra is, and if you speak to the state level managers of Maharashtra, they will confirm, and this I say with responsibility as of today afternoon, that the results of genomic analysis are still pending. It is true that India put together this consortium of 10 national laboratories on 25th December, which I have earlier also said, presumably in advance of the 7th January WHO global meeting on genomic surveillance. But the fact is that the results are not coming in at a speed that's required. Why this is important is as follows. Because it's no more about numbers in aggregate. It is actually looking at town by town. Which town and which city is going to get overwhelmed is going to depend on the variant of concern there and how rapidly it is spreading there. So there is no comfort to take in aggregate numbers at aggregate rates and so on. It is a town by town battle now, particularly in states where there is such a rapid rise. And it's amply clear in Maharashtra, it's amply clear in Chhattisgarh, it's amply clear in Madhya Pradesh. So it is a town by town battle, and that's why VOC data, VOC understanding at that town or district level is so crucial. Of course it will mutate. Of course there will be variants as we go along. That's not the big story is not the issue. The small story really, the specific story is the issue. And that is why identifying variants of concern and those acting as red flags for districts or for towns and cities is so important. And you can clearly see some of these smaller towns and municipal areas of Maharashtra getting overwhelmed if we are talking of Maharashtra.
Well, so let me ask this question, and maybe I can, take this across to Dr. Sinha and see mathematically what are we looking at? Where does this round peak? At what levels, Dr. Sinha?
So this is a question that everyone's asking. Whether the peak is going to happen soon or later. The point is that no model can actually answer that for a very simple reason. There are just too many unknowns. So, we can make a model with a certain assumptions, and based on these assumptions, we can give a date. But the point is, it's so crucially dependent upon these assumptions, and essentially the steps taken by the state governments, which, are by definition something we cannot anticipate at this moment, would immediately change the ground reality. So for example, just to give you an example, back in early March, there was a group from Johns Hopkins which essentially had made projections about how when COVID was a breakout in India, what kind of numbers, how many people would be affected in the next few months and so on. And it turned out that these numbers were like just way over the top. in reality, we saw much fewer numbers, and immediately, people started criticizing the modelers. But it wasn't a fair criticism because there was no way that these modelers could have anticipated the lockdown which happened. Essentially, nowhere in the history of epidemiology has this kind of, extreme intervention has ever been taken by the international community. Previously, in no epidemic have we had, such use of lockdowns on such a massive scale.
Yeah.
And so therefore, it's not possible to anticipate all these things and, say that, what would be, or when will we have the peak? The most we can actually say are giving short-term projections. So, given the current growth rate, we can do projections about what the numbers will stack up in a week or in a couple of weeks, because we need to continuously update our, growth rate estimates because the ground reality is changing very fast.
Oh, yes, absolutely fair enough. In fact, we've seen even in the earlier projections, basis the policies that are put into place, the kind of curves that are put into place, your peaks could differ, and that just then totally does complicate the mathematical modeling. But suffice to say that the experts here are telling us that the worst is yet to come, that these numbers are going to go up and it is going to spread to parts where you're not seeing such high numbers right now. Like I began the show by saying, it isn't just Maharashtra's problem. It's also the problem for Delhi. It's also a problem for Punjab, Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Chhattisgarh that we know so far. Other states shouldn't be complacent either. And when we don't have enough information on what else could possibly be the reason why it's spreading so much, all we can do is mask up, avoid crowded places and sanitize. While the vaccination goes on and hopefully at a faster pace every day, all we can do is follow COVID norms irrespective of what our netas seem to be doing. Completely out of time in the first edition of Conversation. The next aspect will be on the economic impact. And when you're trying to control COVID and you bring in curves, what happens to the economic activity? How do you achieve that balance? And what is it that Maharashtra is in for in the light of the current lockdown norms? So stay with me here on The Urban Debate.